So for this video, we're going to take a look at objects. An object is just a way to take a whole bunch of variables, usually that have to do with each other, and just stick them into a single thing. So we're just going to kind of condense this into a nice little object that we can use. So what that's going to look like is we're going to use const, and now we need a name for the object. So we have wind, raining, day of the week, temps, so let's call this something like weather. Let's set it equal to curly brackets, semicolon. So what we're doing is we're going to stick all these variables up here into these curly brackets. So we're going to space it out a bit. It could technically just go in here, but we're going to do a lot of indentation. So it's going to make the object look really nice to read. So let's take wind. Let's say wind 14. I'm just going to set them equal to the same values up there. Normally you wouldn't actually type all of these out. You would just start right with your object. So I'm going to say wind 14, then I'm going to do comma, and I could just keep going. So I could say raining false, then comma, but it's really nice when you just kind of indent and just put that on a different line every time. So we have raining false, we have day of the week, what is that, Monday? I'm just going to set that to Tuesday. Why not? Let's change it up. Okay, so we got Tuesday, and then we have our temps, so we have temps. And I'll just copy paste that. So we can actually have an array inside of an object. So it's very versatile. You can store a lot of stuff in here. And then for the last one, we don't need a comma. So that's what it's going to look like. You'll see we basically have all the same variables up here. We've just stored them inside of a single object. So I can actually delete that. Actually, I'm just going to comment it out. So this top one is that no longer exists. So now we just have our object here. So there's lots of stuff you could do with this. It's basically like having a list of variables. But let's say I want to access wind. So before I would have said maybe console.log, and I would have just said wind. But since wind is inside of weather, I'm going to actually have to add weather.wind. So basically we're talking about wind that's inside this weather object. So if I print that out, it is going to say 14. So it's just going inside, pulling out that number 14, and we're just printing it out. Now let's say I wanted to access the number 32. So we got to do a bit of digging here. So we're going into the weather object. We're then going into the temperatures, and then we want the number 32. So it's going to look like this. Again, I'll do it out here just so you can see it a little easier. So we're going to do weather, and then dot, and then we are going to do temps, and then we're going to get the index, which is 0, 1, 2. Right, so just like any array, you're going 0, 1, 2, and you're just accessing that. So let's stick this in our console log, and that is actually going to print out the number 32. There we go. And you could do that too with like the push, the pop, the splice. You could add or remove values. Just access it through weather, and then temps, and then just go like you normally would. Okay, so now that we've got that done, oh, what's that semicolon doing there? Let's get rid of that. So now we're actually going to do JSON. So JSON is just a way of taking this object and storing it on your hard drive. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to convert it into a string. So something like Tuesday is a string, and we're going to have this really long string, and inside it, it's going to have a special formatting for all of this stuff here. So to do that, we are actually going to declare a string. So we're going to say let JSON string, and that could be whatever you want, right? It could be a string, it could be maybe my string. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to call it JSON string, and I'm going to set that equal to JSON.string, and you can see the different functions that you can use with this JSON. So we're going to use stringify first, and we're going to stringify the weather. So what's going on the right-hand side here is we're basically saying we're talking about JSON. We want to stringify something into JSON, and the thing that we want to turn into a string is this weather object. So if you had another object up here that you wanted to use instead, you could just plug that object in there and it'll convert it. So let's actually print that out. Let's print out the JSON string. So I'll clear this and I'll press play. So what we're getting back is this long thing here. So basically this is going to turn into this, right? It's going to go, just kind of showing you what it'll look like. JSON string is now going to be equal to that. So it's one long line of text. And how we're going to get that long line of text is by putting that there. So it's saying we're going to get this line of text from using JSON stringify, and we want to store it inside the JSON string variable. So now when we print out that variable, we are going to get this long string. So this is the kind of thing that you would eventually be able to store in a file. So that would be a different function. You'd have to do like file.save or something. We won't cover that here. But once you have that string, it's very easy to just save it to a text file, and you're going to get something like this. Now the neat thing with this is that it's not actually running live in a computer program. So this weather object over here, the one in our code, that's live. That's currently on the RAM. Your computer is accessing and modifying variables. Whereas this one here can just be saved into a text file. I've just saved this on my hard drive here. So it's just a little file. You could actually send that to someone. They could just kind of change the values in there. And then you could read it back open with your program. So stuff like video games will often do this, right? With like a character stat sheet, they'll have like your health, maybe how much damage something does. And then the developers can just come in and they can start to change these values in here to balance stuff. And then they can actually have their program load that text file back up. So what we're doing here is we're saving the object. So saving to JSON, which could be a text file. But what if we want to read a text file? So maybe we don't even have one here. Let's say we just want to read a text file that someone's written in JSON. So we can actually bring it back. We can say const, let's say new, let's say my other weather. So we'll stick to this weather theme, and we'll say it equals JSON.parse. And yeah. So what we're actually going to be parsing is we want to parse this. So we're just going to take this here, we're going to stick that in there, and we're going to parse this string. So we're going to turn that back into a variable container, one of these objects here, right? But we don't actually have to write all of that out because we just saved it to this variable here. So we can just use that. So we're just going to say JSON string. So you just got to see what's being saved where. So remember, we're taking this object and we're turning it into a string. We're saving it into this variable. And then when we want to bring the object back, we can just parse that string. So we're just saying, hey, parse that string that we just saved it into. And that is going to be saved into this new object that we just made called my other weather. So let's say we had saved the weather. We had put it down here. Let's say we change the wind speed to 18. Now, when we load it, that wind speed is actually going to be updated. So in weather, the first one before we saved it, the wind speed is 14. We saved it to a text file. And then somewhere along the line, someone came in here and they modified some values. So nice and easy to do that. And then over here, we actually loaded that file back up. And now when we print, so my other weather dot wind, that would now print out to be whatever we had changed it to. I didn't actually modify it, so it's still going to be 14. But that's the kind of stuff that you can do with JSON. So it's really handy just to take computer variables like this and just to save them to an easy text file that you can read and modify. So I'll just comment that as well. So saving to JSON, loading from JSON to object, something like that, just so you know what it does. Then once we have that object, we can just start to use it. So that's kind of objects in a nutshell, just a way to store different variables. And JSON's a nice little handy tool that you can save computer variables into a text file, modify that text file, and then just load it back up into your program whenever you want. So we'll leave it there for now. See you in the next video.